The dispersal of European Jewry. The dispersal of European Jewry. From an address by radio for the United Jewish Appeal, broadcast March 22, 1939, published in Out of My Later Years, New York. Philosophical Library, 1950. The history of the persecutions which the Jewish people have had to suffer is almost inconceivably long, yet the war that is being waged against us in Central Europe today falls into a special category of its own. That's true. The persecution of the Jews is... There's something about Jews were attacked at Worms, Germany. Like really old school. The Worms Massacre, 1096. The Worms Massacre was the murder of at least 800 Jews from Worms, Holy Roman Empire, now Germany, at the hands of the Crusaders under Count Micho, a count in the Rhineland in the late 11th century, 1096. Wow. He was a leader of the Rhineland massacres, which were a series of mass murders. The massacre at Worms was one of a number of attacks against Jewish communities perpetrated during the First Crusade. So, 1096, that's about 1,000 years ago. Like, not to the date, but 1,000 years, just 70 more years. It'll be 1,000, exactly 1,000 years ago. It's one of a number of attacks against Jewish communities perpetuated during the First Crusade, 1096 to 1099. Following, what is the crusade about? In Germany, the crusade, I thought Christians versus Muslims, but they're in Germany killing Jewish people too. So Christians versus Jews and Muslims and everybody else. And then it was the Catholic Church. So was it even... Could have been Catholics versus Christians too. It could have been Catholics versus against any and every other Christian. Only one kind of Catholic, and that's it. Followers of Count Micho arrived at Worms May 18th, 1096. Soon after his arrival, a rumor spread that the Jews had boiled a Christian alive and used his corpse to contaminate the water to poison the town's wells. Of course, because that's what Jewish people do. Being sarcastic, the local populace later joined forces with Micho and launched a savage attack on the town's Jews who had been given sanctuary in Bishop Adalbert's palace. Though others chose to remain outside its walls, they were the first to be massacred. After 8 days, Micho's army, assisted by local burghers, broke in and slaughtered those seeking asylum there. The Jews were in the midst of reciting the Hallel prayer for Rosh Chodesh Sivan. In all, from 800 to 1,000 Jews were killed, with the exception of some who committed suicide and a few who were forcibly baptized. One, Simcha ben Yitzchak HaKohen, stabbed the bishop's nephew while being baptized and was consequently killed. One of the most famous victims was Minna of Worms. Jewish businesswoman and martyr, she was an influential Jew, significant moneylender with clients and friends among the Christian nobility. So let's, the First Crusade, what was the Count Micho? Who's this Count Micho motherfucker, huh? Crusades, religious wars, initiated, supported, at times directed by the Latin Church in the medieval period. What's the Latin Church? Largest autonomous particular church within the Catholic Church, whose members constitute the vast majority of the 1.6 billion Christians in communion with the Pope in Rome. Okay, the Latin Church is the Roman Catholic Church. The Latin Church. Interesting. Huh. Should be a dead language, shouldn't it? Latin. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. So just a bunch of Christians doing what Christ asked of them. Mass murder. So, yes, Albert Einstein, you are correct. The history of the persecutions which the Jewish people have had to suffer is almost inconceivably long, for nearly 1,000 years, with this Worms massacre. The Count Micho, I want to look at Count Micho. In the past, we were persecuted despite the fact that we were the people of the body. of the Bible. Today, however, it is just because we are the people of the book that we are persecuted. Now that's pretty interesting, isn't it? He likes to, play with words like that. But he was saying before it was because they weren't Christians, right? You're not good enough Christians. You weren't legit Christians. You're not good enough. You were the ones that had killed Jesus, right? That's Pontius Pilate. They added that part, Jews, what do you think we should do with Jesus? Crucify him, crucify him. And so therefore, Pontius Pilate's hands were tied. Why? Because the Jewish people, what was his name? Count Emicho. See if there's an image of this fucking bastard. Yeah, it looks like he's like a saint with his little cane and his hat. The fuck? So, Count Emicho was a fucking piece of shit. Goddamn killed. Ugh, could you imagine? I mean, how big the population of Worms could have been that big, and they basically killed all the Jewish people. Nearly 1,000 Jewish people. Could you imagine? Fucking shit. 1,000 people. I mean, even the bloodiest days of the Civil War didn't see 1,000 people die. 1,000 people. A lot of these mass murders, right? 5 people died at that Club Q. So the massacre at Worms would be like, the Club Q massacre only times 200. Instead of 5 people dying, it'd been 1,000. And so 800 to 1,000. And then the biggest mass shooting was like 59 people or something. So even the biggest mass shooting didn't compare to the mass massacres of, marching armies. In the past, we were persecuted despite the fact that we were the people of the Bible. Today is just because we are the people of the book. The aim is to exterminate not only ourselves, but to destroy together with us that spirit expressed in the Bible and in Christianity, which made possible the rise of civilization in Central and Northern Europe. If this aim is achieved, Europe will become a barren waste, for human community life cannot long endure on the basis of crude force, brutality, hate, and terror. Only understanding for our neighbors, justice in our dealings, and willingness to help our fellow men can give human society permanence and assure security for the individual. Neither intelligence nor inventions nor institutions can serve as substitutes for these most vital parts of education. Many Jewish communities have been uprooted in the wake of the present upheaval in Europe. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children have been driven from their homes and made to wander in despair over the highways of the world. The tragedy of the Jewish people today is a tragedy which reflects a challenge to the fundamental structure of modern civilization. One of the most tragic aspects of the oppression of Jews and other groups has been the creation of a refugee class. Many distinguished men in science, art, and literature have been driven from the lands which they enriched with their talents. In a period of economic decline, these exiles have within them the possibilities for reviving economic and cultural effort. Many of these refugees are highly skilled experts in industry and science. They have a valuable contribution to make to the progress of the world. They're in a position to repay hospitality with new economic development and opening up new opportunities of employment for native populations. I'm told that in England, the admission of refugees was directly responsible for giving jobs to 15,000 unemployed. As one of the former citizens of Germany who have been fortunate enough to leave that country, I know I can speak for my fellow refugees both here and in other countries when I give thanks to the democracies of the world for the splendid manner in which they have received us. We, all of us, owe a debt of gratitude to our new countries, and each and every one of us is doing the utmost to show our gratitude by the quality of our contributions to the economic, social, and cultural work of the countries in which we reside. It is, however, a source of gravest concern that the ranks of the refugees are being constantly increased. The developments of the past week have added several 100,000 potential refugees from Czechoslovakia. Again, we are confronted with a major tragedy for a Jewish community which had a noble tradition of democracy and communal service. The power of resistance which has enabled the Jewish people to survive for thousands of years is a direct outgrowth of Jewish adherence to the biblical doctrines on the relationships among men. In these years of affliction, our readiness to help one another is being put to an especially severe test. Each of us must personally face this test that we may stand it as well as our fathers did before us. We have no other means of self-defense than our solidarity and our knowledge that the cause for which we are suffering is a momentous and sacred cause. The Jews of Israel. And then on Germany. So this is Albert Einstein. That's back, 1939, right? So is that before or after the invasion of Poland? He wants the establishment of a socialist economy accompanied by an educational system which would be oriented towards social goals. This is Albert Einstein's, dream. Albert Einstein's got a dream. With an economy, the means of production are owned by the society itself, and they're utilized in a planned fashion. A planned economy which adjusts production to the needs of the community would distribute the work to be done among all those able to work and would guarantee a livelihood to every man, woman, and child. The education of the individual, in addition to promoting his own innate abilities, would attempt to develop in him a sense of responsibility for his fellow men in place of the glorification of power and success in our present society. Nevertheless, it is necessary to remember that a planned economy is not yet socialism. A planned economy as such may be accompanied by the complete enslavement of the individual. The achievement of socialism requires the solution of some extremely difficult socio-political problems. How is it possible, in view of the far-reaching centralization of political and economic power, to prevent bureaucracy from becoming all-powerful and overweening? How can the rights of the individual be protected, and therefore a democratic counterweight to the power of bureaucracy be assured? How indeed? How that damn Albert Einstein? He's a real Einstein. What are you, some sort of Einstein?